the idea is this is a class war. And until everybody gets on board with that, we're just we're just circling a drain.
It's also very easy to play into racism and sexism and bigotry when your pocketbook is thin and you do not have a pot to piss in. It is very difficult. And I think that this is a perfect transition to something that I know is very near and dear to your heart. Not too many people in the chat, I believe, are in the greater Los Angeles area, but you were obviously very much affected by the wildfires. You are somebody who we had actually reached out to have a conversation because you were somebody who took a lot of shit from a lot of people for suggesting that Rick Caruso was a better option for mayor of Los Angeles than Karen Bass. And it looks like right now, especially in lieu of what Caruso has done over the process of this tragedy and what the actual mayor of Los Angeles has done over the course of this tragedy, it looks like you were right 10 times over, to say the least.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, people are not fond of saying that I was right about anything. So I appreciate it's a rare moment. But look, the voters of LA will decide that in the next election. And my guess is that they'll realize that, yeah, we should have gone with Caruso the first time around. And this time it'll probably be overwhelming. And I want to remind everybody, those are Democratic voters. Those are people on the left. And Karen Bass let them down. And so why did I vote against Karen Bass? Because here in California, Democratic leadership has no accountability. So the press, whatever newspapers still exist, LA Times, etc., local TV news, local radio. Well, I'll leave local radio out of it, to be fair. But the rest of them are tripping over themselves to kiss Gavin Newsom's ass, to kiss Karen Bass's ass. They never challenge them. One guy once asked, hey, we spent like $24 billion on homelessness. Where's the money? And like Gavin Newsom was outraged. How dare you, or whatever. And then nobody ever asked again. Like, no, wait. If we're good-hearted left-wingers who wanted to help the homeless and wanted to help the whole community, we gave you a ton of money to do that. Where the fuck is it? And no, that's outside of the Young Turks. Nobody ever asked them that question. And because, but guys, not having accountability for Democratic politicians hurts Democratic voters. It doesn't hurt Republican voters. She's not the mayor of Tuscaloosa. She's the mayor of LA, right? So what that created was a culture of just keep going, don't actually fix anything, no responsibility, no leadership. And Karen Bass was a perfect symbol of that. And so I knew she wasn't going to lead. I knew she wasn't going to do anything different. I knew she wasn't going to challenge the system because she said it in her campaign. Her main campaign message was, I know how to manage this system better than anyone. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. This system sucks. And we need you to change it, not to effectively manage it into oblivion. And that's unfortunately exactly what we got. So a real leader goes, wait a minute, we're not getting water. I'm on top of it. We got to get this, that, the other thing. Why is the reservoir empty in the place that is most prone for wildfires and is proactive? When she came back and they're asking her questions, she felt like, you guys saw the clip where
horrible.
Yeah, Sky News is asking her questions. This is a legitimate reporter. This is not a fly-by-night guy, right? And she won't answer it. You know why? Because of exactly what I said during that election. Because they feel like they're above the law and they're above accountability. And how dare the press ask them questions? They'll do nothing and the voters will like it. Well, it turns out when your entire city is on fire, the voters didn't like it.
Yeah, I have thoughts about the idea, and we've talked about this before, and I've heard this as a candidate, and I'm sure you've heard this too, when people say, well, why don't you run for this? Or why don't you try running for this first? And all this stuff, as if all positions are interchangeable. Karen Bass was a legislator. She was a congressperson. What in the world makes somebody who's a legislator qualified to be the chief executive of an executive branch of like one of the largest cities in this country? What is that qualification? So I don't know because I don't live in LA, so I didn't do my research. But people just think that you're a known name, so all things are just interchangeable. Like, so you went to law school, so that means you can do neurosurgery, just what? Because it's nearby. So I think that is something that we have, like this idol worship about people and party places that is not founded on anything. But then to think that, oh, we'll just stick them in that place as if she could do that. And I think we just saw that she clearly can't.
Yeah, and she didn't have a lot of management experience. But really, look, I know that it hurts some people's feelings because they feel like, oh, well, Karen Bass is on our side and blah, blah, blah. But she's insipid. She shows no passion, no energy, no leadership. I mean, when your city's on fire, you got to get out there and go, guys, here's what we're doing. And, you know, the fire department's doing this, police is doing this, and just be in charge and give us some sort of confidence that you know what you're doing. But now that the press has gotten a little bit more animated and they're asking her a couple of questions, she almost always gets caught flat-footed without an answer. And I'm thinking, okay, forget like public facing. Did you do your homework? Do you actually even know what's going on? Do you know when people can go to their house? I mean, it was so embarrassing. Trump, who almost never does his homework, caught her in a lie in the press conference. She's like, oh, people can go back now. He's like, oh, so can I tell them to go back now? She's like, no, not now. Well, is it now or is it not now? She's like, well, it's a week. And they're like, is it a week? And she's like, well, it might be 3 or 6 months. Come on. Be prepared. This is not like, and Jen, to your point, these politicians advance on 2 things. One is pleasing donors. The other is pleasing their colleagues. And neither one of that is really a good qualification for leading a city or for being an effective leader. No. So when I see them bragging about, oh, you should see how much of my colleagues love me, I think, oh, that means you never challenge the system. You're a go along, get along person, and that means you're going to do absolutely nothing.
It's true. It's true.
I think that everything that's going on right now is going to have a lot of reverberating effects, whether it's in Southern California or statewide overall. I can tell you right now, if you are thinking about the 2028 presidential primary, I think a lot of people had a kind of an acceptance that Gavin Newsom was going to be a main fixture in the race. I think with what's happened in SoCal, in light of what has happened with the wildfires, he's finished. Like, I don't think he's going to recover from this. I think it's too significant. And the other thing that I think is important, Cenk, is a lot of times everyone gets so caught up in the language. Like, what are we saying exactly? Are we espousing a certain message? It's all about whether you're bought by corporate special interests or you're not. But the one message that I think cannot be missed here, that a lot of people, especially on the populist right, are correct about, is that climate change did not cause the wildfires, but they accelerated them. The language of this is so friggin' vital that the failures of government in California that didn't properly deal with the brush and other things is what caused it. Climate change just accelerated it to the point in which you couldn't control it. And then the last pivot that I think is very important here, or the pillar, I should say, when you talk about the fact that you cut the fire department's budget in Los Angeles, and the biggest reason that budget was cut is because of the fact that you have a real life, John Huston character from Chinatown, the Resnicks, who actually have monopolized the water supply in California. This is a crisis, and they are some of the biggest billionaire donors in the Democratic Party. And we have to address this head on, as far as I'm concerned. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's not just the Resnicks. It's the entire system. Because why didn't PG&E bury their wires? That's probably the top source of fires historically in California. Because they gave campaign contributions to Gavin Newsom, so he didn't make them bury their wires, and because it would cost them a lot of money. And they took a small percentage, tiny, minuscule percentage of the profits that they got to keep by not burying their wires, and gave it to Gavin Newsom. So he didn't hold them accountable, and then in bankruptcy proceedings protected them and not the consumers because he was bought by them. So. Period. And it goes on and on. So there was a great progressive who was running along with me for a state seat back in 2020. And he made a terrific point. He said, the California Democratic leadership is always talking about how we got to negotiate and we had to compromise. He said, we have a supermajority. Who are we compromising with? And the answer is they're negotiating and compromising with their own donors. So they're literally, you don't have to listen to a single Republican in California. So when they pretend that they're negotiating with the Republicans, it's hilarious, right? In reality, they're just doing favors for their donors. So the underlying problem is almost always the same: corruption. And then some on our side, as you guys are super familiar with, really believe the MSNBC nonsense about how when Mitch McConnell takes $1 billion from corporate donors, he's the devil and he's the worst. But when Nancy Pelosi takes $1 billion from corporate donors, she's an angel and is not affected by it. That's insanity. They both work for the donors. And so if you believe that mindset of the Democrats are angels and they're not affected by the money from PG&E or the Resnicks or the oil companies or the drug companies, well, then you're on a different planet. The reality is it's good cop, bad cop. They pay off the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats to screw us all.